pretty, we wouldn't want to miss that. Go over the ground rules for a minute and then have a little bit to say about each of the candidates before we begin. We'll have 5 questions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to give a yes or no answer and an explanation of that answer. We're going to try to keep them on point. We have a timekeeper, and it's up to me if they start talking about something besides the war to jump up and yell. And I can yell pretty loud, so we should be all right on that. We'll start here, and then the second question will start with Mr. Faust and so on down the line, so everybody gets a turn to go first and everybody gets a turn to go last, if that's important. So you'll hear the questions as we go on. We would ask you not to be noisy, even though you support whoever happens to be speaking, because they only have 2 minutes. And your applause or cheers is going to come out of that 2 minutes. So you might want to let whoever your favorite is, if you have one, have his or her say. I'll tell you that the little biographies I have came from their websites. I'm not sure, they're all about the same size, as close as I could make them. I'm not sure what I picked is what they would have picked, but I'll tell you what I found anyway. Kathy Dahlkemper is a civic leader, a small businesswoman, a wife and mother of 5. She says the breadth and depth of her background gives her the experience to make a difference in Congress and in the nation. She helped create the Lake Erie Arboretum at Frontier Park and has been its director for 10 years, honing skills in program management and collaboration. She also obtained $2 million in funding for the program. She helped children and families with their work with the Girl Scouts of America and the Worldwide Marriage Encounter. Through the nonprofit partnership, she helped organizations assist individuals in challenging times. Kyle Faust is the son of a former county councilman and Democratic chairman, Paul Faust. He has lived all his life in this congressional district. He earned bachelor's and master's degrees and is a doctoral candidate at Duquesne University. As a councilman, he has been a centrist and has had support from Democrats and Republicans. He helped repeal an unpopular real estate assessment fee, reestablish the County Human Relations Commission, and enact a strategic plan to stabilize the county's libraries. He's also helped to build a surplus in the county fund balance and was a proponent of a project labor agreement requiring prevailing wage and union employment for County of Erie construction contracts. Tom Myers grew up on his parents' 200-acre farm bordering Lake Pleasant. He's been a hunter and fisherman his whole life. He grew up in a strong union family which boasts 5 generations of iron workers. His father, Vern, was president of the Erie Central Labor Union. He earned a bachelor's degree in labor studies and a law degree from California Western School of Law. He's part owner of the Erie law firm of Nichols and Myers, PC, and counts several local labor organizations as clients. He's also a member of the Board of Governors of the Pennsylvania Trial Lawyers Association and a 20-year member of the American Association for Justice. He is the Chief Volunteer Officer and Board Chair for the YMCA of Greater Erie. Steve Porter was born in New York. He earned bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in Fine Arts and Educational Administration and taught on the college and secondary levels from 1967 to 2003. In this area, he was a professor at Mercyhurst College. He founded the Rod Serling School of Fine Arts. I want to find out more about that. And has received many awards and honors in fine arts and education and has published 17 books. His political involvement goes back to the 1968 campaign of Senator Robert Kennedy for president. Porter ran for the New York State Senate and was active in the Binghamton Sister Cities program. After moving to the Erie area, he became a candidate for Congress in the 3rd District. He and his wife Rita have raised guide dog puppies for the blind. Mike Waltner was born in Erie, where his family has worked for 3 generations as iron workers, window washers, and food service providers. He earned a bachelor's degree in religious studies and a Master of Divinities degree from Union Theological Seminary. He has lectured on world religions at Fordham University in New York. He decided on a career in community involvement and public service rather than ordained ministry after ministering at Ground Zero on September 11, 2001. He worked with community and religious leaders in New York City, addressing important social issues, and now works at the Cathedral of St. Paul in Erie doing community outreach, and working with youth. So we'll begin. I'll get out of the way here in a second. The first question is, do you support the immediate withdrawal of U.S. forces from Iraq, and why or why not? And we'll start with Ms. Dalton. You want to use that one so here?
Thank you. I appreciate everyone being here, and I'm really happy to be here with you today. And I want to start by saying I was against this war from day one. On the day of shock and awe, I sat and watched that TV in total shock. I could not believe that our president was taking us into this war. And I believe that it's an ill-conceived war, and it's time to end this war. Enough is enough. It's time to get our troops out. I believe that we need to get our troops out as soon as we can, safely and with honor. We need to have a plan. There's absolutely no plan to bring our troops out of Iraq as far as I can tell. And so I believe what we need to do is bring those allies in the region together to help us with a plan so that Iraq is not left in a chaotic state, which no one except for maybe Iran benefits from. And let's get the situation stabilized and have a plan to bring our troops out as soon as possible, safely and with honor. I think we've squandered all the goodwill that we had across the world after 9/11. I know that's already been discussed, but I totally agree that we need to go back to diplomatic relations. And through those diplomatic relations, we can bring other countries in to help us to get our troops out of Iraq as soon as possible. So I want to just reiterate that it's time to end this war, and it's time to move on and bring our troops home as soon as possible.
I want to thank all of you for coming today. I was proud to march with many of you earlier. We all had the frostbite through from the 4 or 5 blocks that we had to walk over here. That is the first peace march that I've ever participated in. God willing, it'll be the last. This war needs to come to a just and swift conclusion. It needs to start immediately. There's been a lot of progress about, a lot of talk about military progress in Iraq lately. I'll give the president the benefit of the doubt on that one. However, there's been absolutely no political process in Iraq, and there won't be any process of really having to put that country back together until the United States is outside of the borders of Iraq. So we need to begin that quickly and immediately. It needs to be well thought out and well planned, so we don't have our troops sniped at on their way out. And that, again, that needs to start immediately.
I'd also like to thank everybody for being here on such a cold day. That wind was howling earlier. I'm sure you all felt it. In any event, I also was opposed to this event, to this war, before it ever started. Who didn't know that we were going to create generations upon generations of new terrorists as a result of entering Iraq? This is without a doubt, I think, one of the most costly and worst foreign policy blunders in American history. We squandered a period of international goodwill after 9/11, one of the greatest ever toward American interests, and sparked a new intensity among terrorists that has left us truly more vulnerable. The Bush administration's own intelligence data shows that Al-Qaeda has reconstituted and is more powerful. We took our eye off the ball. We could have captured bin Laden and dismantled Al-Qaeda's leadership. Instead of doing that, we invaded Iraq under false pretenses. Now, 6 years later, it's unthinkable that he is still free to plot his next massacre while we are mired in an Iraqi civil war that's cost thousands of Americans' lives and countless civilians' lives. I firmly believe and will fight to bring our combat troops out of Iraq as safely and swiftly as possible. I'm not a military expert. I can't tell you how fast that'll occur. However, I will vote for it as quickly as that legislation can be proposed. We need a new strategy that is focused on diplomacy and collaboration with our international partners and those in that region to stabilize that region. America cannot issue a blank check of blood and dollars to cover this monumental mistake. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me
You all know what my position on the war is. I was against it from day one. I've marched with you and spoken out against it for all of it, all 5 years of it. Of course, I want to withdraw our troops immediately and at least to a perimeter. We don't know what the repercussions of withdrawal will be, which is why I think some troops at a perimeter might be necessary. What has caused this war, what will continue to cause the wars that we engage in, include our misreading of history, and I hope to speak to that later on, and also the inordinate interests of special war profiteers who pay off both members of Congress on the Republican and Democratic side. I will speak to that later with very concrete information. The gentleman who spoke earlier, the man who was wearing the veteran's hat up here, told you the truth. Republican or Democrat, it hasn't made any difference. In my 65 years, there's hardly been a year when the United States has not been at war. This will continue until we take profiteers out of the political system and have them stop funding the elections of both major parties. It is for that reason that I left the Democratic Party and I'm running as an independent.
Like everyone on this panel, I was against the war from the beginning. I too have marched against this war. I was here at this time last year marching against this war. My brother-in-law is an Air Force MP. He was over there for almost a year. My sister and he were very fervent supporters of George Bush when he first entered the military. They have now left active duty because they don't believe in their government anymore. They don't trust their government to take care of veterans anymore. So I want to get the troops out as soon as possible. I believe that could take as much as a year. I share a lot of the frustration that I think many do who elected majorities of Democrats in both houses and still have not seen an end to the war. I mean, that's why Democrats were elected in 2006. And what I can do is reassure you that I will use the power of the purse when I get to Capitol Hill, that we will not vote, I will not vote for any war funding unless it is tied to a timeline. We've already missed a major threshold. April 2008 was when the Baker Hamilton report recommended that we begin a withdrawal. It's already too late for that. We cannot continue to expend blood and treasure at the rate that we are right now in the Middle East. We are not safer. Tom is right. We have been antagonizing an entire generation of young people to hate the United States. We have to begin aggressive diplomacy in the Middle East. I believe that Iran, Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia all have a vested stake in stability in the region. And we need to bring our troops out of there. And this is important too. This is not a withdrawal. It's a redeployment of our troops and our assets to fight the war on terror. We have to go after Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and we have to make sure that our soldiers who are on their second, third, and fourth tours of duty are able to get the rest that they need. Their families and they have been asked to make too many sacrifices and to stay too long in this war, which is a failure. Thank you.
Our second question is, if you are elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in the 3rd District, would you vote for fully funded withdrawal and the cutting off of other funds for the war in Iraq? And we'd like to begin with Mr. Foss.
Thank you. This is the most difficult question that we are going to face here today. If God willing anyway, as I said earlier, we're going to have a Democratic president. As others have spoke, they will have a Democratic president. This question really will become moot. It becomes much more important if John McCain gets elected and he starts on his 100-year strategy as far as keeping us in Iraq. That's where this question will really come into play. And if it looks as though we are going to be in Iraq forever, for the lack of a better phrase, then this question will have to be answered, and I'm going to seriously consider having to tie all future funding to a timetable to get out. I don't think that'll be necessary if we have a Democratic president. But we have a Republican president. This question will become very important, and we're going to have to begin to, as I said, tie this to a timetable because we can't stay there forever. The standing of the United States in the world, as Sister said earlier, is plummeting, and it's never going to change until we're out of Iraq. And the leaders of our government need to understand that that's going to have to happen soon and quickly, and I'm willing to support those types of things.
I agree with Kyle to a very significant degree in that regard. I would use the powers of the purse if John McCain, God forbid, is elected as our next president. He has indicated a willingness to stay and to keep our troops in Iraq for 100 years, as we said, which is absolutely ridiculous. This was a catastrophic misadventure. I don't get the argument that we are somehow not supporting our troops by bringing them home. So, in any event, if John McCain is elected, we may be in a situation where we would need to use the powers of the purse. I would not hesitate under those circumstances to do so, other than, obviously continuing to provide the necessary funds to be able to withdraw our troops in as safe a fashion and swiftest fashion as possible. That's the key. You can't do it so quickly that we are endangering them in the process of moving them out. They need to have the necessary funding to provide for their safety in that process. Thank you.
The answer to the question is I would vote to fund fully their withdrawal from Iraq, and I would not vote for 1 penny for any more war in Iraq, only for the withdrawal of the troops. I told you that I'd be a little bit more specific. I'd like to be now. When I left the party, I researched this book and wrote it. It's just come out. It's called America's Dying Democracy. It will alert you to what is really going on in our government. I pray that every one of you reads it. I'm quoting now from page 26. I'd just like to let you know who is controlling those votes in Congress and what the control amounts to in dollars and cents. Since the war in Iraq, Kellogg Brown and Root, which is Halliburton, has given $2.38 million in political funding to members of both parties. They have gotten in contracts for Iraq $11.4 billion. That's a return of 3,000 to 1. The same is true of Parsons Corporation, the Fluor Corporation, the Washington Group International, Bechtel, and there are approximately 95 other major corporations that have produced the same equation. You pay off people to get into Congress, you pay off the parties to make war, and then you make billions and billions of dollars in profit from that war. That will never happen with me. It cannot happen with an independent who's unowned.
As I said, I would use the power of the purse in order to bring the troops home if that were necessary. If it were necessary, I would even vote against my own party in order to do so. I believe very strongly that it's imperative. The American people have spoken. They want an end to this war, and I would do whatever it takes to end it. When it comes to funding with the withdrawal, I mean, obviously, we want to remove our troops safely. I am committed to as long as there is a date certain, to taking up to 12 months to allow all of our combat troops to withdraw from the region. Thank you.
I have an answer. I have a nephew who's flying over in Iraq right now. It's his 3rd tour of duty. He was told when he lands that he should fly his airplane in a way that would help save money. But it's a much more dangerous way to land his plane. And he said, no, I will not do it, because I will not put my crew in danger of losing their lives to save a few dollars on the repair of his plane. That is my big concern, is the troops in Iraq and keeping them safe. We need to certainly have a withdrawal plan, and we need to have that funded. And we also need to make sure that our troops can be brought out safely. Travis Lindsay used to live with me. I prayed for him every day that he was in Iraq, as I pray for my nephew now and my previous nephew, Ryan. And I have a daughter who's in the Coast Guard, and many people don't even know that there are Coast Guard coasties over there serving too. She's not there, but she could be. So I'm very concerned about our troops and keeping them safe. And for their safety, that's what I would fund in terms of other funding. But we need to have a plan, and I agree actually with all my other candidates. If it's John McCain, then it would be having to tie, I believe, the power of the purse to withdrawal, because we need to insist that we have a plan and we get our troops out of Iraq as quickly as possible.
Sorry about that. Our third question is, do you oppose permanent U.S. bases in Iraq? And we want to start with Mr. Meyer.
Unequivocally, yes. I think that, the ongoing presence on a permanent basis of our troops in Iraq would actually serve to destabilize and work against diplomatic efforts to stabilize that region. I think it would be unnecessary and a hindrance. We have friendly nations over there where we already have bases. I don't believe it's necessary to do so in Iraq. Once again, this goes back to this having been such a horrible, horrible mistake from the outset. We invaded under false pretenses. We need to get out of there. Our troops have sacrificed so much, and their service has been so honorable. The job is done, ladies and gentlemen. We need to bring our combat troops home. That's all there is to it. We don't need to be there on a permanent basis. I think it works against, diplomatic efforts to stabilize that area.
Once again, I'm quoting now from page 26. The answer to the question is, of course, I oppose permanent bases, but the permanent bases in Iraq are only a small percentage of the problem. Page 26. The United States spends more in defense and military than every other nation in the world combined. We spend over $600 billion a year on war. The next largest spending is $70 billion, and that is Communist China, $67 billion from Russia, and it goes downward from there. There's something the matter with that picture. One of the things that's happened since the lobbyists have taken over both parties is that much of the military has been privatized. There aren't any military cooks anymore. No one cleans up the latrine. That now goes to Halliburton, and that's where their money goes to. It's hundreds of military bases throughout the world, many of which are not even reported to you because they're so-called black bases. They're bases which we don't want on public record. This is not going to stop, not only in Iraq, but all over the world, until we stop funding the people who own the Congress. All of this has been planned. We have to come to our senses and stop the funding of war in this country. That's what's behind this war and the bases and all of our other military spending. Something's the matter when we, 4% of the world's population, spend more on war than every other nation in the world combined.
I do not support the presence of a military base in Iraq. I do not support the extension of our military presence in any way in the Middle East. I believe that it is an irritant. I believe that it causes more problems and will lead to more problems down the road. Problems like this, we currently see. I mean, to understand what's happening right now, there literally in 8 years, not only have we spent a large amount of goodwill that the world had for the United States, we have exacerbated existing tensions in a way that I think is difficult to comprehend. Today, kids all over the world, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, throughout the world have access to the internet. And their first understanding of the United States is one of a unilateral superpower that tries to push the world around and doesn't have respect for other people's cultures, their way of life. When we invaded Iraq, we went into the center of the Muslim world. And in removing Saddam, we set off hundreds of years of sectarian violence without an understanding of what really would happen. And I think it's important that we send folks to Congress who understand the stakes, how high the stakes are, and also understand the hard work that lies ahead of us of reclaiming some kind of moral authority in the world again. We have to be able to reclaim the voice of America, the moral voice of America that we've lost. And it's happened very quickly. And there's a lot of folks who will have questions about our foreign policy even before Bush Jr. But what has happened over the past 8 years is unprecedented in the world. And we have so diminished our standing in the world that it's going to take years and years and years to reclaim. And building bases and extending our presence in the Middle East is only going to make things worse.
I too absolutely oppose any permanent bases in Iraq. We shouldn't have entered Iraq in the first place, and we certainly should not be staying there. It is time for us to stop trying to impose our values and our way of life on other people and respect their way of life. And by having any type of permanent base, actually reiterating kind of what Mike just said, I believe will be more of an irritant and could actually lead to further chaos in the region.
The only thing that would be worse than the calamity we've had in Iraq for the last 5 years is a staying there with permanent bases. We really have to change how we view the world and how we deal with the people that are in the world. Are we going to continue to have cowboy diplomacy? Are we going to continue, or are we going to start dealing with our friends to help contain our enemies as best we can? We can't choose who are the leaders of other countries, but we can make sure that the policy around the world is such that those people aren't causing harm to others and that we do things together rather than writing it on our own. And that takes a real rethink about what we're going to be able to do in the future. The only way we're going to have peace in the Middle East and to not have the United States over there time and time again, spilling blood and spending money, is a complete redo of our environmental policy. And that's something I'm fully committed to. I've done things on a local level to protect the environment. We need to come up with alternative sources of fuel that are going to be job creators here in the United States, but that will also take the pressure off of having to rely on so much foreign oil. Most people don't realize we're the third largest producer of oil in the world, yet we guzzle so much of it. That's one of the few things Bush has gotten right in the last few years. He's finally admitted we're addicted to oil. Well, until we get off that addiction, and we can do that here in the United States, if we can unleash the American spirit to do that, that's the only way we're going to ever be able to get out of the Middle East in the way that we are now, as far as we're the prime source of targeting the Middle East right now.
Okay, question number 4 is, do you oppose U.S. military action against Iran? And again, Mr. Porter.
The answer is yes, of course. We're addicted to more than oil. We're addicted in this country to war. I told you that I hope to expand on our misreading of history. I think this is the question to do it. There are 2 great historians, Palmer and Colton, from Duke and Princeton University, who wrote a book on the modern world. One of the things that they said in that book was that after World War II, the imperialistic nations of Europe, of whom the United States is a child, had to learn, these are their words now, had to learn not to be the nations of the world, but to negotiate with them. We have not learned that. The French didn't learn it in Algeria, they didn't learn it in Indochina, we picked up their burden in Vietnam, we didn't learn it. The people of South Africa did not learn it with apartheid, England did not learn it with India. The things that are going on now in the Middle East is a constant misreading of history. We have gone into an area of the world which has been oppressed by Europe for over 1,000 years, starting with the Crusades. And at the point of a gun, we have now tried to tell them that their destiny is not correct and that we have to impose democracy on them. It's not going to work there in Iraq. It's not going to work in Iran. It's not going to work anywhere. All it has done has been to, as many on this panel have said, aggrandize the forces of terrorism against us. And I speak as someone who lost 2 members of my family, actually my wife's family, in the Twin Tower attacks. Those 2 guys worked at Cantor Fitzgerald, the investment company that lost just about everything. And the enemy that killed them was from Saudi Arabia, not from Iran.
So, in terms of supporting military action against Iran, no, that would obviously be insane. We couldn't even if we wanted to. The answer to this issue is we shouldn't be thinking about extending military action in the Middle East. We should be trying to work on a diplomatic means that we can all, first of all, begin to deal with the fiasco in Iraq. But also, we need to start thinking about the future. Severing diplomatic relations with Iran after the Tehran hostage crisis was a mistake. We need to learn to talk to our enemies. We need to learn to talk to people we disagree with. There are significant forces within the Iranian society that want democracy, and we should encourage those. We should encourage those forces. But the idea that we can somehow impose democracy through military means is obviously wrong, and we're seeing that in Iraq right now. Our own intelligence has clearly demonstrated that there is not a nuclear threat in Iran. There is not a nuclear threat. Our own Pentagon intelligence shows us that clearly. So I oppose any kind of escalation with Iran or Syria. The answer to the problems that we face there is found in diplomacy.
I'm a mother of 5, and when my children have a problem with somebody, I would tell them to try to sit down and talk and work it out. I absolutely oppose taking any U.S. military action against Iran. I also do not believe there is an imminent threat to begin with. And secondly, I'm utterly dismayed with this current administration that when we have someone that we don't agree with, an enemy, as our president wants to call them, we do not sit down and talk. We won't even talk to them. So I agree that diplomacy is the means to solving crises that we have with other countries. So let's use our diplomatic efforts. I also believe this current administration has brought on this state of fear upon us. The war on terror, those words alone, I really don't believe there's a war on terror. There is terrorism going on, and we have to try to deal with it. But there is no war on terror. So to continue to use that term, I find unacceptable. We need to talk with our enemies. We need to obviously try to avoid further terrorist attacks within our country, and we could do that in many ways. But we do not have, in my opinion, a war on terror going on. We have terrorist attacks. And the state of fear that this current administration has imposed upon the American people, I think is really, as a mother, I don't want my children living in a state of fear. I want them to have an optimistic future. I want them to have a future that's bright and safe, and a future where they feel that they can make a living and continue to raise their families. So I would like to see us go back to a more positive outlook by talking to our enemies and working out things through diplomatic means.
Well, I'll answer this question quite similar to what I did the previous question. The only thing that's worse than the calamity of starting one preemptive war would be starting another one. This really, in many ways, the similarities between the justification Bush had begun to use for going into Iran were spooky, quite frankly, to what he used for going into Iraq. So no, I would not support that type of action. And again, we need to use our diplomacy. That's one thing with the Bush administration. Unfortunately, he has not been encouraged by the Congress as much as he should be to use real diplomacy to take care of the people who, again, we can't decide for the Iranians who's going to lead that country, but we can help make sure that they are not a danger in their own world to the rest of the world by using our diplomatic resources. We are the greatest country in the world. We will be for a long, long time. because of what we stand for. And that's why we're having a tough time getting things accomplished in the world right now, because the moral authority that we once had is declining day after day after day because of the way we've used our diplomacy and our military to the detriment of the values that we stand for as a country, going all the way back to the start. As I said earlier, I have relatives that have fought in wars, that have served in the military. I was raised to be two things, actually maybe three things, a proud Yankee fan, a proud Democrat, and a proud patriot. And I will be those three things till I die. But we need to make sure that we continually stand for the things that this country has always stood for, and that's the moral authority that we've had for a long, long time.
Well, I won't hold the fact that you're a Yankee fan against you. Folks, bombs don't kill ideas. You know, that's a failed and ridiculous notion that they do. You know, people's worldviews and philosophies, the only change you can bring about at gunpoint are changes for the worse. And it's a shame. You know? Invading Iran right now, let's face it, two wrongs don't make a right. You know, we've all learned that. This would be a colossal, colossal error, perhaps greater even than the one that we've seen with Iraq. You know, we need to speak with our enemies. And what's the old saying? You keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. You know, we spoke with the Soviet Union every single day during the Cold War. We should never, and this is a quote from JFK that Senator Obama has mentioned on the campaign trail, we should not negotiate out of fear, but we should never fear to negotiate. We have to have those lines of communication. In this situation in Iran, relations with Syria, we need international diplomacy. We need to communicate. We need collaboration. We need to find common ground. And you know, we can't go around thinking that we can force others to have the same philosophies as we hold in this country. Thank you.
And our final question, would you support increased funding for Iraq War veterans? And we'd like to start with Mr. Walter.
The answer is yes. You know, the Bush administration has been very good about sending our soldiers into war, but not very good about taking care of them when they get home. And I also think that we have a history that where we have really abandoned our soldiers. This happened after Vietnam. It continues to happen. And this isn't only about taking care of our soldiers who are now in Iraq. They're coming back with traumatic brain injury. Many are coming back with mental health issues after suffering through the traumas of war. It's about taking care of all our veterans. You know, I was at a bowling fundraiser for the VFW, and I was talking to a veteran of the Korean War who was getting finally the treatment that he needed, and he was actually trying to explain to me how he was able to make it appear that he was wounded when he wasn't, and how he teaches other veterans these tricks so they can get the health care that they need. Isn't that ridiculous? That these folks who have sacrificed so much for our country have to come back and have to basically try to lie and outmaneuver bureaucratic processes to get care. I spoke to another gentleman, his name's Greg Graham, he's a Vietnam War vet. He told me, you know, I'm an old guy now, my teeth are falling out, and I can't get dental. I can't get dental care because I don't have a Purple Heart. And you know, this is about what we really value as Americans. It goes to the very center of what we believe. We need to put dollars behind all of the rhetoric about supporting the troops. So I would support mandatory increases in funding our VA hospitals, making sure that all our veterans when they return have health care, have what they need, especially those who are suffering from traumatic brain injury and these things. It's going to be expensive. It's going to cost a lot of money. But we must do it. It's a moral imperative that we do this. So I would support funding, yes.
my answer to this question is yes, I would definitely support increased funding for our Iraq War veterans. I believe that all of our women and men who are serving this country for all of us deserve the best treatment that we can give them. Back in November, just days before Veterans Day, a bill came up into the House. This bill was going to be the largest increase in funding for the VA system in the 77-year history of the VA system. It also was going to add 18 processors because claims are backed up, about 400,000 claims are backed up within the VA system. It was also going to increase funding for post-traumatic stress syndrome and for traumatic brain injury, two of the worst and most common injuries coming back for the soldiers coming back from Iraq. Our current Congressman Phil English voted against the bill. It passed the House, and on Air Force One was vetoed by President Bush. I would have voted for that bill, and I would continue to fight for our veterans. Again, just we need to take care of our veterans. Our veterans deserve the best care that we can give them.
Any real sign of a progressive society and a caring society is how it treats those that are the most vulnerable. And we have veterans returning who have served our country and in many cases have serious health problems and medical problems. We cannot address those in full. It is a shame that that occurs in this country, and we need to change that. And that is where something I have a little bit of experience in this, unlike my opponents in this race anyway. I've been able to pass public policy here at the local level. This last budget, the Erie County Council on the resolution sponsored by me, we helped purchase 3 vehicles for disabled veterans of America to allow them to get back and forth to their appointments here in the local area. And Phil English, as Kathy indicated, abandoned, in my opinion, veterans when we get a chance to do something about it. That cannot happen in this country. To the people who have put the uniform on, and I can't tell you how much respect I have for somebody that puts on the uniform and goes and does that. You know, I had an opportunity to do that when I was a young man. I chose not to. I went off to college. And I was very fortunate that I never had to serve in the military. Other people have done that for me. And then to turn your back on those types of people, though, when they do return, or even if it's in peacetime, it doesn't matter if they return to war, in my opinion. What matters is they have served this country, and they deserve every measure of respect and support that they're going to need, and we're going to fund that fully, in my opinion.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, it's a travesty that we can have tax breaks for the wealthiest 1% in this country, and tax breaks for companies that send our good-paying jobs overseas, and yet we have 200,000 homeless veterans. I mean, that is just shocking. It's immoral. We need to do such a better job of honoring the service and sacrifice of our troops. And we're sending them into harm's way, and when they come home, they're being kicked to the curb, is what's happening in far, far too many cases. I've represented a number of disabled veterans over the 21 years of my law practice. I fight for regular folks against the powerful. That's what I've done for 2 decades now. I've represented a number of these veterans in Social Security disability matters. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to be absolutely certain that we're funding the system as is needed to take care of these record numbers of troops that are returning with traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, and catastrophic orthopedic injuries. We need to be sure that we're providing them with necessary funding for educational and vocational opportunities and to help them start businesses, things of that nature. Phil English, on a piece of legislation last summer that would have provided our vets, because there's this backdoor draft going on. These troops are going back for redeployments time and time and time again. This legislation would have given them the same amount of time off as their most recent deployment. Phil English didn't have the spine to vote yes or no on that bill. He voted present. We can't afford a congressman who won't stand up for our veterans. Thank you very much.
The answer is, of course, my father was wounded in World War II, suffered for the rest of his life, and 3 years ago went to the VA hospital in Philadelphia. They told him that he needed dialysis and that they couldn't provide it because they didn't have enough machines, and he waited for a year, had a heart attack, and then died. That begs the question, however, of health care for the entire nation. And this question is really tied up with H.R. 676, the bill for universal health care in the United States, which ought to be passed, and it would take care of all of us, not just our veterans, who of course deserve it, but we all deserve it. I'd like to leave you with one more quote from that book. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. It was said to us on January 17, 1961, by Dwight Eisenhower in his farewell address. He said it on television. We have allowed it to take our democratic processes from us. And I beg you to change that by getting special interests out of government and by voting against both major parties which are owned by those interests. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the candidates very much. It made my job very simple. They stayed within the time and pretty much on the topic, and that's good. Sometimes that doesn't happen in these kind of things. And now I would just ask Richard McVeigh to come and close the meeting for us.
And it is furthermore reflected by those of you who are here today, everyone at EPI, all the volunteers who made this event possible. Jerry, thank you very much. We'd like to remind you that the next EPI meeting will be Tuesday, March 11th at 218 East 11th Street. Is that correct? Yeah? Okay. Let's keep the issue of the Iraq War on the front burner, as it should be. Also on Wednesday, March 19th, in front of the Federal Courthouse, downtown Erie by Perry Square, the women in black will be here. And there will be a silent vigil at 12 noon. That's March 19th, Wednesday. Once again, thank everyone for coming. Great job.